Welcome, everyone. In my work consulting with executive teams, I constantly see incredibly sharp, talented people completely blindsided by sudden crises. Today, we're going to change that. We're diving into an explainer based on Dr. Felix Mauersberger's groundbreaking research. The goal here? To radically shift how you look at your company, moving you from a reactive manager putting out fires into a proactive decision architect. All right, let's jump right in.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. First, the secret of system collapse. Then, we'll break down the half trap, followed by building resilience through the STAR cycle. After that, we've got some real-world case studies on growth versus adaptation, a framework for loop diagnosis, and finally, your new mandate as a decision architect.
Okay, part 1. The secret of system collapse.
So why exactly do companies that seemingly do everything right just fail? The usual boardroom answers are, bad leadership, a streak of bad luck, or some sudden unpredictable market shift. But Dr. Mauersberger's research points to something much, much deeper. Systems generally don't fail because of external shocks. No, they fail because of poorly designed internal feedback loops. Basically, the architecture of your internal processes dictates your success or failure long before a problem ever becomes visible on a balance sheet. To understand this, think about a microphone placed just a little too close to a speaker. A tiny sound gets picked up, amplified, picked up again, and within seconds it escalates into this deafening, totally uncontrollable screech. That's a reinforcing feedback loop. Now contrast that with a thermostat. If a room gets too cold, well, it kicks on the heat. If it gets too warm, it shuts the heat off. It actively counteracts any deviation to create stability. In your organization, these exact two mechanisms literally determine whether a minor hiccup escalates out of control or gets smoothly corrected.
That brings us to Section 2, Understanding the Half Trap.
Dr. Mauersberger calls that escalating microphone effect the half framework. It's this creeping four-stage process. First, it starts with a hook, just a small stimulus, maybe an early win that heavily rewards a specific behavior. Then comes amplification. That behavior gets imitated, resources come flooding in, and momentum really starts to build. Next, we hit lock-in. The structures, the dashboards, even your corporate culture becomes so hyper-focused on this one single path that changing course becomes, virtually impossible, or at least prohibitively expensive. And finally, fracture. The system accelerates itself right off a cliff simply because it has, quite literally, forgotten how to brake.
The really dangerous truth here is that success itself can be the trap. Think about the massive stock hype around GameStop a few years back. An early success cycle pulled in more and more buyers, driving prices even higher, until the whole system inevitably collapsed under its own weight. Or look at WeWork. Early victors created this toxic culture of founder reverence, alongside a relentless mantra of just growth at any cost. Warning signals were completely ignored, skeptics were pushed right out the door. The half pattern essentially punishes reflection and rewards blind continuation. As an executive, if success is silencing all criticism in your ranks, you need to realize you're already deep in that dangerous lock-in phase.
Moving on to Section 3, Resilience through the STAR cycle.
Now let's talk about the antidote, the STAR framework. This is the thermostat for your company. It begins with strain, but here's the twist. Instead of ignoring that pressure or trying to just push through it with sheer force, strain is treated as incredibly valuable information. Next comes tempering. A deliberate brake is applied, and the system actually pauses. This pause creates the necessary space for adjustment, where resources are reallocated and processes get corrected. And that ultimately leads to resolve, a brand new, highly robust baseline of stability. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that in a healthy system, friction isn't an inefficiency. Actually, scratch that. It's more than just not an inefficiency. It's a life-saving structural safeguard.
You can really see the stark difference in mechanics here. HAF runs on reinforcing forces, things like social proof, network effects, and sunk costs. It acts like pure, unadulterated fuel, making the system run faster and faster until it literally shatters. STAR, on the flip side, relies on restraining forces. We're talking deliberate friction, organizational slack, redundancies, and clear pacing rules. These are your brakes. As the chief architect of your organization, your primary job is to build these brakes before momentum turns into a trap. Because let's face it, without brakes, you aren't driving a car. You're strapped to a rocket with absolutely no steering.
All right, Section 4, Case Studies, Growth versus Adaptation.
Let's look at how world-class organizations use these brakes in the real world to actually move much faster in the long run. Take Slack, for example.
Did you know they originally started out building an online multiplayer game called Glitch? Well, the game was failing. The strain was totally obvious: stagnant user numbers and rapidly dwindling cash. But instead of falling into a half loop and just blindly pumping more marketing dollars into a dying product, the founders deliberately hit the brakes. They stopped the escalation. During this period of tempering, they realized that the internal communication tool they'd built just to talk to each other, it was working beautifully. So they adjusted. They shut down the game entirely and pivoted their whole business around that messaging tool. They found massive, billion-dollar stability through a conscious stop.
Or consider the beating heart of the Toyota production system, the red andon cord. While a lot of traditional manufacturing companies forbid stopping the assembly line under any circumstances, preferring to just sort out the defects at the very end, Toyota empowers every single worker on the floor to halt the entire production line the exact moment they spot a problem. A tiny defect gets immediately transformed into a system-wide learning opportunity. Toyota doesn't just ignore blinking red dashboards. They have engineered friction, that immediate stop, deep into their corporate DNA. That structural break is exactly what makes them one of the most reliable manufacturers on the planet.
Dr. Mauersberger really hits the nail on the head here. He says, feedback, not leadership, intent, or resources, is the decisive factor separating fragility from resilience. Think about that. You can have the absolute best intentions, highly charismatic leaders, and bottomless budgets. But if your internal information pipelines are wired to filter out bad news and only reward blind growth, you are eventually going to fail. The architecture of your feedback loops inescapably dictates the ultimate fate of your company.
Let's move to Section 5, Diagnosis. Which loop dominates?
So how do you actually diagnose your own organization? Well, here's an actionable toolkit you can take straight into your very next management meeting. Step 1. Diagnose your team's pressure response. When a crisis hits, does everyone just hunker down and work longer and harder? That's escalation. Or do you pause to analyze the root cause? That's stability. Step 2. Map out the fuel and the brakes in your current flagship projects. Honestly ask yourself, where are the restraints? Step 3. Identify your loop stage. Are you in the early phases where minor tweaks still work, or are you fully locked in, where pivoting is going to be incredibly painful? And finally, Step 4, match your intervention. For early-stage issues, light behavioral nudges are totally fine. But for late-stage lock-ins, you absolutely must implement hard structural redesigns.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, your role as a decision architect. What does all of this mean for your specific role as a leader? Well, it requires a complete mental shift in your mandate. You are no longer just a crisis manager showing up to put out daily fires. You are a decision architect. Your real job is system design. You need to intervene early on behavioral trends, way before they escalate. When a system is deadlocked, you need the courage to execute those radical structural redesigns we just talked about. And perhaps most importantly, you have to fiercely protect your organizational slack, your reserves, and your pacing rules against that constant grinding pressure for more efficiency. Remember, strain is not a threat to your leadership. Strain is your most valuable piece of intelligence.
This brings us to the absolutely crucial question you need to take away today. I want you to look closely at your company dashboards, your bonus structures, and how criticism is actually handled in your board meetings. Ask yourself ruthlessly, have you accidentally built a machine wired only for blind acceleration? Or have you intentionally integrated intelligent brakes that turn systemic strain into long-term resilience? The answer to that question will absolutely dictate the future of your organization. So think about it, architect your systems wisely, and we will see you next time.